Pete Nova here with Player Profiler. We just recently dropped our top 10 updated rookie running back rankings. If you haven't gone and checked that out, go ahead and do so. But today we're going to do our updated top 10 rookie wide receiver rankings. So let's get into it. My number one wide receiver in this class is going to be Tet McMillian out of Arizona. This is a guy that gets top 10 draft capital. He goes 8th overall to the Carolina Panthers. And this is an offense that's been dying for a playmaker. They finally got the coach right. David Canales upgraded this offense. The offensive line gave Bryce Young a ton of time, and Bryce Young looked like he took a step forward. But the main issue is there is not a lot of pass catchers in this offense. It's just a bunch of Jags. When you look at some of these guys in this offense last year that were catching the football, you had Deontay Johnson and David Moore combining for 115 targets. When you look at the current depth chart, you have Adam Thielen, who is pretty old at this point, but he can give us a couple of good games here and there. You have Jalen Coker, who the fantasy community seemed to really like, but I just feel like it was one of those, you found some money in your pocket and he overperformed expectations. But Jalen Coker, he could be a decent player, but I'm not too worried about that when it comes to Tet. And then you have Xavier Legette and Hunter Renfrow, who is now came back from the grave. And Xavier Legette had 84 targets in this offense, right? If Xavier Legette can have 84 targets in this offense as a rookie, I don't see a world where Tet doesn't have at least 100 to possibly even 120 as a rookie. We've seen tons of rookies go ahead and have over 100 targets in their rookie season, and I'm expecting big things for Tet his rookie year, and I really like the landing spot for him. There's going to be arguments between him and Travis Hunter, but for me, Tet was always my wide receiver one before the draft started, and he's my wide receiver one since the draft has ended, and I love him here at the number one overall. My number two wide receiver in this class is going to be Travis Hunter. It should come as no surprise, right? We just talked about him in the last segment with Tet McMillian, and he is my number two wide receiver in this class and goes number two overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I think it says a lot about Liam Cohen and the front office, the fact that they traded up to get him as their first move in this organization should tell you all that you need to know about what they think about Travis Hunter. On top of that, they've already came out and shared that they view him as a wide receiver first player, which is what we really wanted to hear, right? We were kind of confused on how to rank him pre-draft, right? And where you would put him in mock drafts before the draft. And now we finally get the draft capital. We get the clarification that they see him as a wide receiver first, right? And when you look at Travis Hunter, he had a 38% college dominator rating. He was very good when he was on the field. And I think the biggest concern that people have is that he likely will not be the number one in his offense, right? Brian Thomas Jr. is unfortunately the elephant in the room right now, right? Brian Thomas Jr. had an amazing rookie season last year, and I don't expect Brian Thomas Jr. to fall back down to earth. I think he's going to continue to ascend, and I think that's fine for Travis Hunter, though, right? I don't think it hurts Brian Thomas Jr. I think it just helps Trevor Lawrence the most, right? And Travis Hunter, when you look at the vacated targets in this offense, Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram are no longer with the team. That's 101 vacated targets. And you might sit there and say, well, what about Brenton Strange, right? Is Brenton Strange going to be a guy that, steps in and takes the targets that are vacated from Evan Ingram? Well, Brenton Strange played a decent amount last year, and Brenton Strange overall had 53 total targets. Maybe those targets go up a little bit for him, but I'm not worried. Travis Hunter is going to be the number two option in this offense. This team invested a lot of draft capital in him. They clearly believe in him and his skill set and his ability to play both ways efficiently and effectively, and predominantly on the offensive side of the football. So I'm comfortable here with Travis Hunter. My number three wide receiver on this list is going to be Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver out of Ohio State. And I absolutely love his landing spot. He gets drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and gets top 20 draft capital in the first round, picked 19th overall. And again, I really love this landing spot. People are going to sit there and be upset about it, but I actually feel really, really confident and I'm pretty excited about it, right? When you look at this Bucks offense last year, they ran 11 personnel 71% of the time. That was good enough for eighth most in the entire NFL. And 11 personnel means there's three wide receivers on the field, one running back, and one tight end. So he's going to get his opportunities to get on the field. They did not spend this kind of draft capital on a wide receiver if they didn't plan to use him. Now, is his upside limited year one? Possibly, but he'll be on the field and he'll have his opportunities. We saw Jaylen McMillian have multiple touchdown games last year due to injury. We saw Kate Otten step up. We saw the running backs both have 50 plus targets in this offense. He is going to get targeted in this offense and he will be productive, right? Maybe it takes an injury for him to be a guy that you can consistently plug into your lineup every week, but let's not kid ourselves about the wide receivers in front of him. You have Mike Evans, who just is about to turn 32 years old before the season starts. And you have Chris Godwin coming off of a dislocated ankle injury, who's 29 years old. And yes, Godwin did ink a new deal, but there is some concern there, right? Is he going to be ready week one? Probably, but is he going to be the same player week one? Is it going to take him some time to ramp up? I think it's a really awesome landing spot. And let's talk about Egbuka for a second here. He is a guy that can play outside and inside, right? When you think about Chris Godwin, he was super successful in this offense in the slot. And if Egbuka gets the ability to play in the slot, I would be super excited for his upside, right? But likely going to be Chris Godwin, who plays the majority of the snaps there because of how well he performed there. But Egbuka can play out wide as well. We saw him play 164 snaps out wide in 2024 and over 200 snaps out wide in 2022 in Ohio State's offense. This is a receiver that had 2 seasons with 1,000+ yards and 10 total touchdowns. I absolutely love the fit for him, and he's going to be my number 3 ranked wide receiver. My number 4 wide receiver in this class is going to be Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas. This is the last wide receiver that receives first round capital in this draft. He went 23rd overall to the Green Bay Packers, and I actually happen to like the fit. I know some people don't love it because it feels like a crowded room, but is it really that crowded? Christian Watson went down with an injury last year and is likely going to take some time coming back with the ACL. Then you have Jaden Reed, who has a limited route tree, right? He is a guy that feels kind of gadgety. And then you have two other guys, Dontavian Wicks, who can't catch the football, right? But seems to be a good separator and a good route runner. And then Romeo Dobbs, who is a nice piece in the offense, but he's really not a guy that's going to explode or take a huge target share. He's just a guy that's going to move the chains. The team also put draft capital into the wide receiver position again with Savion Williams. So we'll see how that shakes out. But overall, I like the fit for Matthew Golden. When you think about his speed, right? 4.29 paired up with Jordan Love, who has a gunslinger mentality, right? I think we saw the offense shift a little bit last year because they kind of had to rein him in due to, his turnover worthy plays. And obviously there were some injuries to him. And the offense kind of just shifted towards the middle of the season to the end where they became more of a run dominant team. But I also think part of it had to do with the fact that their receivers consistently let them down. Now, this is a team that spreads the ball around a lot in the offense, which again, people are concerned about, but they finally spend first round draft capital on a wide receiver. We've been waiting on this for years, and I think they must see something in Matthew Golden. I think he pairs up with Jordan Love really well, and I think we have some big plays ahead of us for this duo, and I think Matthew Golden could get a decent target share, right? So I like the fit. I know some people are down on it, but I think it's totally fine. I think there's going to be targets to go around. And I'm not as high on the other wide receivers in this room. And really, they need a guy to step up. They spent first round capital on Matthew Golden. He has a great opportunity. If he can just be the guy that many thought he could be in the pre-draft process, right? Then there's no reason to think that if he's as talented as many thought he was, that he can't take a hold of the wide receiver one position in this room. And I like him as my 4th wide receiver overall. My number 5 ranked wide receiver is going to be Tre Harris, who now gets drafted to the Los Angeles Chargers, wide receiver out of Ole Miss. This is a guy who gets day two capital. He was drafted in the second round, 23rd overall. We've seen a lot of wide receivers in the second round get drafted and make an impact for fantasy year one as a rookie. When you look at this fit, it is perfect. The scheme at Old Miss was a very play action heavy offense, and he benefited from that. But now he finds himself with the Chargers, who ran play action second most in the entire NFL in the Greg Roman system. It's a great fit for Tre Harris. And let's look at him in college, right? A 5.12 yards per route run. That was the most in all of college football. He had a 35.8% college dominator rating, a breakout age of 20 years old. This is a guy that has really strong hands and is a great ball tracker. And he enters a room that, quite frankly, is not very talented, right? I mean, they lost Joshua Palmer, 65 vacated targets from that. They didn't add to this tight end room like many people expected them to. It's Will Dissly and Tyler Conklin. And then you have Quentin Johnston, who is a holdover from the previous regime. He had 91 targets last year, Quentin Johnston, which was 21 less than Lad McConkey. If Quentin Johnston can demand and command 91 targets in this offense, I don't see how Tre Harris can't replicate that. They spent a second round pick on a wide receiver for a reason, and I absolutely love this fit for Tre Harris, and that's why he's my wide receiver 5. My number 6 ranked wide receiver in this class is going to be Jayden Higgins, and if you follow me, you know Jayden Higgins was one of, if not my favorite wide receivers to scout in the pre-draft process. I absolutely love what this kid put on tape. He had a great showing at the Senior Bowl and as well at the Combine, and he goes high second round to the Houston Texans, number 2 overall pick in the second round, first wide receiver off the board. And look, it's not necessarily a fit that I love for the first year, but overall, long term, I think it's a really awesome landing spot, and it helps CJ Stroud out the most, who is probably the biggest winner when it comes to the draft on this team at the quarterback position. They also brought in Jaylin Noel, his running mate, who could be a replacement for Christian Kirk. Keep in mind, Christian Kirk is on an expiring deal, and these two wide receivers in Christian Kirk and Nico Collins have had issues staying healthy. Nico Collins has missed 17 games over the last 4 seasons. Christian Kirk has missed 20 games over the last 2 seasons. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities for Jayden Higgins or even Noel to have some production and be a guy that you might play a couple times in your starting lineup due to injuries, or overall, maybe the talent just wins out and they find themselves on the football field. Jayden Higgins should get on the football field. This team ran 11 personnel 62% of the time, which was about average, right? 16th in the NFL last season. Overall, this is a fast wide receiver. He's 6'4", he ran a 4.47, and he has elite hands, a 2.2% drop rate. He has twitchiness to play in the slot, but the size of an X wide receiver, I think it's a really good landing spot for Jayden Higgins, and I'm really excited about it. My number 7th ranked wide receiver on this list is going to be Luther Burden, wide receiver out of Missouri. He gets drafted by the Chicago Bears with premium draft capital. He goes second round, 7th overall. And look, he finds himself in a crowded wide receiver room, right? DJ Moore, you have Roma Dunze, who people are expecting to take the next step forward. Keenan Allen was there, but is no longer there this season. But when you look at last year, they had 3 wide receivers who had 100 plus targets in this offense. The other elephant in the room is Colston Loveland was drafted 10th overall, who is a tight end, and he should probably see some targets too, which could eat into some of the workload of a rookie like Luther Burden. But overall, this is a really fun player to watch. 4.41 40-yard dash, explosive, twitchy player who, if he's in the right offense, can thrive. And what better to go to than a offense like Ben Johnson's, who is likely going to manufacture touches for Burden. I'm sure they're going to get him on a lot of jet sweeps, a lot of different screen plays. And honestly, he can do a lot of what DJ Moore did, but probably better. Though I do really like DJ Moore, there are some concerns in that locker room with DJ Moore. There were some comments made by Ben Johnson about guys giving effort, and it seems like they're talking about DJ Moore, who did have some effort issues last year. But overall, Luther Burden steps into a hopefully good offense. We think it's going to be upgraded, right? They did some work on the offensive line. They brought in a new coach, an innovative coach in Ben Johnson, and they're in a division that should be in some very high scoring games, right? You have Minnesota, you have the Lions, you have the Packers, right? These are going to be high scoring games, and I don't feel like this team took care of the defense very much when it comes to upgrading that side of the football. So they're likely going to be continuing to play from behind, which should only help the pass catchers in this offense. Again, you're going to start noticing a trend with some of these wide receivers towards the back end of the list where I just don't know how much of an impact they'll make year one. I am not as high on Luther Burden as other people were. I wasn't as high on him as people were before the draft, and I'm not as high on him after the draft. But look, this is a guy who had a down year last year, but in his sophomore season, he had 86 catches for 1,212 yards and 9 touchdowns in 2023. He is a very explosive and twitchy player. I think if used correctly and effectively to manufacture touches, he's going to be a very fun player for fantasy football. I just worry that his route tree is a little bit limited, but Ben Johnson and this team spent heavy draft capital into him as a prospect and is now a football player on their team. I think they're going to find ways to use him, and they clearly have plans for him in this offense. So he's going to be my number 7th ranked wide receiver on this list. My number 8 ranked wide receiver in this class is going to be Kyle Williams, who gets drafted by the New England Patriots. And I'm actually starting to become a little bit bullish on this offense. I absolutely love the landing spot. This guy gets drafted 3rd round. He goes 5th overall in the 3rd round. So we get day 2 capital. And this is a pretty wide open wide receiver room. They brought in Stephon Diggs, who's coming off of that injury, but I still expect Diggs to get his targets and still get some volume. But outside of Diggs, look, they brought in Mac Hollins. They have Kayshon Boutte. They have Pop Douglas, who's probably the best wide receiver, in my opinion, outside of Stephon Diggs. And then they have Jalen Polk, right, who they drafted last year, and Baker, right? So it's just a bunch of Jags in this room. Kyle Williams has an opportunity to get targets. There's a clear path to production for him. And when you look at his year in 2024, he had 70 catches for 1,198 yards and 14 total touchdowns. We've all seen the clip of him against Travis Hunter burning him deep for a touchdown. And this guy was really impressive, right? He had a 2.71 yards per route run, which ranked 10th overall in this class. And his 8.4 yards after catch per reception is 3rd best among draft eligible players. He forced a missed tackle on 30% of his receptions, which was 8th best. And overall, this is a really good situation for him. Again, there is not many options in this room. They brought in Trevion Henderson, who I'm really bullish on as well, right? They have Ramondre Stevenson. Both of those guys should catch some passes out of the backfield. They have Hunter Henry, who's going to do his thing. We know he's going to be a guy that's going to catch a bunch of touchdowns, right? Maybe not have a ton of volume, but is going to find his way into the end zone. And they made some upgrades on this offensive line, right? They spend top 10 draft capital on a left tackle. They bring in Morgan Moses at right tackle. They bring in a center, Bradbury, who maybe wasn't that great for the Vikings, but is surely likely an upgrade for this team. And overall, I think they're on the upswing. I'm not saying it's going to be a top 10 offense, but I think he's going to find himself in a situation with a young quarterback in Drake May, who looked good last year in flashes, and he has a clear path to opportunities and can grow in this young offense. I'm extremely bullish on him. I like him here as my number 8th wide receiver. My number 9th ranked wide receiver, who feels like he's flying a little bit under the radar, is going to be Jack Bech out of TCU. This is a guy who gets day 2 capital as well, finds himself drafted 2nd round, 26th overall to the Raiders. And I absolutely love this landing spot for him. It's a really good fit. This guy has Pete Carroll written all over him, just 4 drops in his entire career. And he's going to be a safety valve for Geno Smith, who can kind of get the ball out quickly to. He's a reliable weapon. And when you look at this wide receiver room, it is not very deep. This is another situation where a guy gets really high capital. We get second round capital in a room that's not very good. And when you look at the guys in this room, outside of Jacoby Myers, you have Trey Tucker, Christian Wilkers, who I don't even know who that is. They drafted Dante Thornton Jr., rookie, right? It's not a very good room. And so to spend day two capital on Jack Bech says a lot. And I think he has a really good chance to be the number one receiver in this offense, outside of obviously Brock Bowers, but beating Jacoby Myers out for Geno Smith's number one target at the wide receiver position. I think it's a really good landing spot. And also, Jack Bech, one of only 3 wide receivers to post a 3+ yards per route run versus zone coverage. He had 3.13 yards per route run versus zone. I absolutely love the landing spot for him, and he's going to be my 9th wide receiver overall. My 10th and final receiver here is going to be Jaylin Noel, who is Jayden Higgins' running mate and now finds himself with the Houston Texans with Jayden Higgins. Some of this may sound a little bit redundant, but definitely different skill sets and profiles. He profiles closer to Christian Kirk, which we talked about before. This is a guy that gets drafted in the 3rd round, 15th overall. Many times we have seen teams take wide receivers in the 2nd and the 3rd round in the same draft, and the guy drafted later ends up being more productive, right? When we look at Jaylin Noel, I just talked about Jack Bech. Well, Jaylin Noel was one of those 3 wide receivers to post 3+ yards per route run versus zone coverage at 3.08 yards per route run. He had 1,100 yard season last year, a 74.1% success rate versus man coverage, which was 84th percentile. He's got good ball tracking ability and is a deep threat. And again, just like we talked about with Jayden Higgins, Nico Collins missed 17 games last year, and Christian Kirk, who he profiles closer to, missed 20 games in the last 2 seasons, and Kirk is on an expiring deal. I don't see the Texans bringing back Kirk after spending a 2nd and a 3rd round pick on both of these wide receivers next year, right? And overall, 62% of the time they ran 11 personnel last year, which was 16th in the NFL, right? So 3 wide receiver sets, 62% of the time. So Noel can definitely find himself on the field. And I think, look, overall, if Christian Kirk does leave, this is a guy that you're getting probably at a pretty cheap price, because a lot of people didn't love the landing spot because he feels kind of blocked. But if you can afford to wait on a guy like him, he's going to be a sneaky player that you can draft and expect production from maybe a little bit this year, but more of next year if Christian Kirk leaves. Or you can look at it this way. Maybe you make a trade for him after he has a down year, possibly this year, because he can't get on the field, if you're expecting Christian Kirk to leave in free agency next year. But that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Theo Greminger is gone. We wish him all the best, but he did leave for us a great gift, the 2025 Player Profiler Rookie Guide. That's right. It is here. It is beautiful. It will help you dominate your rookie drafts this year. It features 60-plus player breakdowns, written primarily by Theo Greminger himself, as well as our proprietary NFL draft grades and strategy and tactics for dominating your rookie draft this year. We have a composite rankings with Theo's rankings, Cody, John Lobb, Jagger May, and Jax Falcone. It's right there on Player Profiler. It's $20. You won't find a better draft kit. You certainly won't find a better draft kit value. So go get it on PlayerProfiler.com.